I'm Chance.
And I'm Sarah Catherine.
And this is Season 3 of Conservation Connection.
Presented by Last Chance Endeavors.
We are a husband and wife team running a wildlife education nonprofit. It's focused on connecting students to their environment.
Each week, here on Conservation Connection, we do just that, introducing you to the groundbreaking science and conservation work that's happening every day across the globe.
We talk to professionals in the world of conservation science and wildlife management, and we ask them about their career,
their current projects,
their wild and crazy stories from the field,
and everything in between.
This episode is a collaboration with EarthX here in Dallas, Texas.
EarthX is the largest Earth Day celebration in the world, and it brings in speakers from every corner of the environmental arena.
Listen in to hear the stories of today's environmental titans, covering everything from environmental law, ocean health, renewable energy, clean transportation, and so much more.
Let's get to the show.
Alrighty guys, welcome to another episode of Conservation Connection. We're recording this one as a remote episode, which we're very excited to do, for EarthX Ocean. So check the show notes, scroll down, see what we've got going on. They've got some really cool stuff. But we're very excited to be sitting across the virtual table from Vasser Seydel, who is the Deep Seabed Mining Campaign Director at the Oxygen Project.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me here. I want to celebrate World Oceans Day and World Oceans Week, now it seems, any other way and with anyone else. So thank you, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. We're super excited to have you here. Why don't we just start with a quick little snippet of what exactly is deep seabed mining?
So deep seabed mining is the process of quite literally mining mineral deposits from the deep sea. This is an area beyond 200 meters that covers a large percentage of our Earth's surface, and it's outside of the areas of national jurisdiction. So it's in our international waters.
I mean, I already know that there's a ton of issues behind regulating like fishing activities and stuff like that. Seems like something like deep seabed mining that by definition happens in international waters is pretty difficult to make sure is being done sustainably, right?
Yes. In short form, yes, absolutely.
So what got you interested in this topic?
So that's a loaded question because how does one stumble upon deep seabed mining when it's being purposefully kind of really kept under the radar? So I first heard about deep seabed mining in a presentation about, I guess, 2 years ago. And at that time, unfortunately, I thought, the oceans people got this. That's a big deal, but the oceans people have that covered. And this year I had maybe, I guess what you would describe, not an epiphany, but I just woke up one day and I was like, what's going on with that? And I did some digging and realized that no one was really working on this, and that, stopping deep seabed mining hadn't really come far away since when I first heard about it. So I went to Oceans COP this year and was kind of on a mission to see what the climate was around deep seabed mining. And I was actually told by several political leaders from around the world, but one in particular was a politician who is the Minister of Economics for an island nation, and looked at me and said, do you know what you're up against? And it's already a done deal. But unfortunately, I guess I'm a millennial Gen Z cusper, I'm 1995. In 2020, we don't really have an alternative not to do something. I can't really accept deep seabed mining as our future, knowing what I know. So I, ever since then, put all my other work to the side and really have focused on deep seabed mining and getting something called a moratorium out of the October meetings.
There's really something to be said for kind of latching on to an issue and feeling that passion of I have to do something and setting everything aside so that you can really focus in on that and give it your whole attention. And I know what it feels like to come across that. It's really a great thing that you have pursued that fully.
Absolutely. And I'll just say too, because this prefaces my ability to put everything aside and just start working on deep seabed mining, even in the face of kind of speaking truth to power. And that was when the activist in me was really mobilized. And that happened earlier this year when my step grandmother told me that she was going to start something called Fire Drill Fridays in DC. She was going to move from California to DC and protest every Friday on the Capitol steps for a Green New Deal and anti-fossil fuels. And when she told me she was doing this, I said, how can I help? I want to be there and do something with you. And she said, come to the first Fire Drill Friday. We haven't announced it yet, but just come to DC on this date and we'll protest together, peacefully protest together. And I got there, and the first night I was sitting with Annie Leonard of Greenpeace USA and my step grandma Jane Fonda, and they were like, "Are you ready to get arrested tomorrow?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?"
No one told me about being arrested.
I didn't know that, but I was like, "Yeah." I mean, that's the first thing that came out of my mind. Yeah, but like, what also do you mean? And they assured me we're peacefully protesting. We're not, doing any obstruction of justice or anything violent, all peaceful. And I was like, okay, I'm totally on board for that. And they told me at that time that there was a transformative change when you put your body in line with your beliefs. And that sounded so great to me then, even though I had no idea what they were talking about. But I was like, okay, awesome. Count me in. And then when that actually happened and I was arrested at the Capitol protesting against fossil fuels and for the Green New Deal and going to jail and being handcuffed, something actually really does change. And it was a transformative experience for me. And I think maybe some people would resonate with that. Maybe some people in the audience would have no idea what I'm talking about. But that did, ever since then, have a transformative change for me. Instead of just being an activist behind the screen or being an activist, just talking to your friends, actually getting out and putting your body in line with your beliefs changes you. And it gives you motivation and gives you drive even in the face of adversity. So when I was told by political leaders who have way more power than me that this is a done deal, it was more of a motivation to get going instead of a hindrance of, oh, this thing is way too big for me to stop.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're obviously super passionate about the environment and conservation and climate change and all of that. And I think a lot of our listeners will resonate with that, especially with you being, 20-something out there doing what you can to protect the environment. So tell us a little bit about your background growing up. Like, were you always passionate about the environment? And were there ever any other moments where you were like, kind of an epiphany of like, this is what I want to do?
I'm sort of imagining this like record scratch where you're on, like, your grandma's like, are you ready to get arrested? And it's like, camera zooms out. I bet you're wondering how I got here.
Yeah. Yes. This is the time where you insert that part. Actually, I grew up around conservationists and environmentalists and activists on all sides of my family. And it's funny growing up like you guys in the South. You're not like all of your other friends, probably. But I grew up thinking about environmentalism just as my lens. It's the gaze that I look through. So it didn't really register to me that this is a unique passion. It was just kind of the way I operated. Just because it's the values that my parents and my grandparents taught me early on. So I grew up fishing and outdoors and hiking and really respecting, I guess, Mother Nature. And that's kind of something that not everyone gets to grow up with. And a lot of young people have to kind of come to that on their own these days.
Yeah, and I imagine that as somebody who kind of grew up with it, when you started to gain an awareness of that not being the value system that everybody holds, it can be really shocking and affronting. Like, I still have a very vivid memory. I don't think I've ever told you this, Sarah Catherine. I have a very vivid memory in elementary school of like seeing a roly-poly on the ground. And I love roly-polies. And like
roly-polies are awesome.
they're so cool for many reasons, and I can't get into them now. But
that's childhood. Childhood in a nutshell is
roly-polies. Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
true. Yeah.
So there I am, probably third grade, looking at this roly-poly on the concrete, and a girl in my class walked up and squished it.
Oh no!
And like to her, she was just squishing a bug, which is what she does because bugs.
Did you cry?
I wouldn't be surprised if I cried. But that sort of, when you're raised loving nature and that's who you are, it's really affronting to realize that not everybody holds that value system. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how did you get involved with the Oxygen Project?
So I started working with the Oxygen Project when we had a mutual interest on deep seabed mining. And that mutual interest stemmed from my dad, who started the Oxygen Project 2 years ago with kind of this crazy idea and not a direction, especially for him, never having a Instagram account, never having a Facebook account, but he just understood that social media is a platform where a lot of people are having global conversations. And we now live in the age of the Internet of Things. And to make some of those conversations count, because as we know, we have 10 years to cut our emissions by half to achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius so we don't have runaway climate change. So we have to start changing our conversations and changing the consciousness of the conversations happening in the world. So he started this just to really get a lot of information out there around the environment. And when I started working on deep seabed mining, I had no idea how I was going to achieve anything. I just knew I had to start doing something about it, given such a short time frame to do something about it. And it's really rare to be in front of the launch of a new global industry, and especially one that approaches the final frontier on our planet, which is the deep sea. And so as large as that seemed of a task, I knew that this is kind of something I had to work on. So I told my dad that I was doing this, and I started working I just started cold calling oceans groups, asking them what are they doing about this. And a lot of them had no idea about deep seabed mining, and a lot of them had no idea of the urgency around it. And then eventually I was really garnering a lot of momentum. And my dad said, as I explained to him the issue, he said, you should work with the Oxygen Project to launch a campaign and create partnerships. So that's what we're doing.
It sounds like it's just this perfect mix of like you had this passion and he had this platform, and it was just a perfect way for you to further your message and your intent of garnering both awareness and action around this issue.
Absolutely. And I just want to say to all of the people graduating from college right now, if you don't know what you want to do, just find something that you're passionate about and start working towards that. And your life really will culminate in a path to take you where you're supposed to be. And I had no idea how I was going to do this, but I just started. And that's so important. And my dad, it was the same way with starting the Oxygen Project. He had no idea what he was necessarily doing, but he just started. And it's just crazy how the universe got us started at the right time. And even though it's just my dad and we don't have any degrees of separation, we were really brought together. And I feel like it was meant to be, specifically when we're talking about deep seabed mining.
Yeah. So, talking about deep seabed mining, why don't we get into that a little bit more? Chance and I actually found a video that MIT had made. It's like a 2, maybe 3-minute video, but watching the video really helped me visualize it. And I was like, whoa, this is absolutely crazy. And it was really my first time hearing about it, and probably a lot of our audiences too.
Yeah. Basically, it looked like a giant Roomba on the seabed that's tethered to a boat going along, sucking stuff off the ground, right?
Yes, I like that analogy. I haven't heard that one yet, but it really paints a correct picture.
So what is the process of seabed mining?
So there's actually 3 types of deep seabed mining. And there are 3 different geographies in the bottom of the ocean that are most attractive to mine for rare earth minerals. But exactly like you were saying, it's almost like a Roomba going down and sucking up the seabed for these rare earth minerals. There's also the process of actually dredging and cutting up the crust at the bottom of the ocean. But no matter what the technique is, it takes large, super expensive machinery to go down there, and it's super disruptive to these ecosystems.
So what ecosystems are down there? Like, what kind of organisms are we talking about, and why are they so important?
So these ecosystems are super complex and they don't exactly look alike. That's the crazy part of deep seabed mining, is that we know more about our outer space than we know about the deep sea. And from the limited amount of science that has been done, scientists can see you can take 1 square foot of the deep sea a couple feet away from another square foot, and you have a completely different organisms and completely different species. And a lot of these species have not even been classified or are known to science, and we don't even know how to classify them. So it's super problematic when we're talking about deep seabed mining, because you create irreversible impacts on ecosystems that we fully don't understand yet. But one thing that the science does point towards is that these ecosystems, these microbes, these species are vital in fixing carbon into the seabed. And we know that our oceans, and specifically the deep sea seabed, is our largest carbon sink, and it's largely pristine, largely untouched. And going in and doing mining practices create irreversible damage to these ecosystems, which has the potential of exacerbating the climate crisis when you're taking out the very organisms that are necessary in fixing the carbon into the seabed.
So to kind of zoom out on this story here, talking about carbon sinks and fixing carbon and stuff like that, basically what I'm understanding is that carbon, which makes up most of life on Earth, right, sinks down to the bottom of the sea floor as marine snow. And the organisms there, when you say fix it, they're converting it into inorganic forms, or they're basically incorporating it into the crust, the ocean crust on the bottom of the floor, right?
Absolutely.
And so
yes.
that is a critical job, because if that carbon remains in the ocean, it remains in circulation. And it means it can exit the ocean more quickly and become problematic greenhouse gases. We're basically removing the machinery that the ocean has to absorb carbon and get it out of the cycle, and thereby mitigate the effects that it has on catastrophic climate change. Is that about right?
You did a really good job of explaining the carbon cycle. So exactly, by going in and deep seabed mining, we destroy the ocean's ability to provide vital ecosystem services and support life as we know it on the planet. As you guys probably know, the ocean produces more oxygen and stores more carbon than any other place on Earth. And these specific ecosystems in our deep sea, even though largely misunderstood or largely not understood by humans, are the very base of that food chain of providing those ecosystem services for us.
And then the other troubling aspect of this is that the ocean floor is not like a freshly mown field that can pop right back up because it's sitting under abundant sunlight and nutrient resources, right? We're talking organisms that take literally hundreds of years to grow a couple of centimeters. And so taking a giant industrial Roomba and running it across the ocean floor to pick up minerals is setting these ecosystems back thousands of years of growth in just a couple of minutes.
Exactly. And that's why these experts and scientists are saying that these impacts and effects of deep seabed mining are irreversible and permanent. They don't exactly know the number of when species or these ecosystems would be able to revive, But because it takes so long for these ecosystems to be created in the first place, it creates complete dead zones when you go in and disrupt the habitat. And you said hundreds of thousands of years, but actually it can take millions of years, and it has taken millions of years. And one example of this is polymetallic nodules that sit on the bottom of the ocean floor. And one of the forms of deep seabed mining is mining for these polymetallic nodules. Deep seabed mining companies would love to say that this is the most environmental friendly form of deep seabed mining because they'll go in and pick up these potato-like, rock-like structures that just sit on the top. But the problem with mining polymetallic nodules is that they are not rocks, they are not potatoes. They take millions of years to be created, and they're ecosystems in and of themselves that do exactly the job of fixing carbon into the seabed. And they also balance trace metals in the ocean. So they're responsible for keeping these environments not toxic. And when you take polymetallic nodules out of these ecosystems, our ocean loses the capacity to do so indefinitely, because it would take millions of years, if it was even possible, to create new polymetallic nodules.
So these polymetallic nodules, which, right, poly, many, metallic, metal. It's just a lump that has a lot of different metals and elements in it. These are, in some aspects of deep sea mining, this is like the gold. That's the gold that they're trying to find. That is what they're turning into a resource. But it's also, you're saying it's like essentially a buffer where when the mineral composition of seawater shifts, these act as a way to either absorb excess or release needed minerals that are critical to these ecosystems?
Yeah, they are fundamental in these ecosystems at balancing trace metals. And that's why you see that they have a lot of rare earth minerals inside of them. The deep seabed mining company, Deep Grain, is probably the loudest of the deep seabed mining companies that are specifically interested in mining polymetallic nodules. And they are the ones who reference these polymetallic nodules as golf balls or potatoes. But like you said, they are vital in these ecosystems at both fixing nutrients and carbon into the seabed, but also balancing those trace metals. Where too much of these metals in the ocean would be toxic and not enough would mess with the biological function of the ocean.
Absolutely.
What's the plan with these resources once, these deep seabed mining companies get them off of the ocean floor, bring them up? What are they doing with them next?
So these rare earth minerals that these deep seabed mining companies are going into the deep sea for are necessary actually in the current lithium ion batteries that we have today. The amounts are decreasing. We saw just the other day, Tesla announced that they have the 1,000,000-mile battery, so efficiency is going up. Also, they've announced in the past that they've decreased the amount of nickel in their batteries, and some other really great news that's making the batteries more efficient and last longer. On top of that, Tesla has announced that they're going to have gigafactories that recycle lithium ion batteries. But rare earth minerals are largely needed for lithium ion batteries, and technology behind our computers, our phones, and other technology.
So like just consumer and industrial electronics in general. So sitting here looking at the myriad electronic devices we're using to record this episode, none of this would be possible without the rare earth metals that are being collected in some form from somewhere on planet Earth, right?
Right. Our computers, our phones, and specifically the reason why deep seabed mining companies are legitimizing going and destroying our deep sea ecosystems for rare earth minerals is for a green renewable energy future, and specifically for EVs and lithium ion batteries. And as much as that sounds like a good thing, because I want to solve climate change and I want to see EVs all over the road.
Electric vehicles, right?
Yes, electric vehicles. And I couldn't live without a computer. I couldn't live without my phone. But it is an oxymoron to say we need to destroy the very ecosystems in our deep sea that provide us with the ability to have oxygen to breathe and also do the best job of anywhere on the planet at storing carbon, to say that these rare earth minerals are going to solve climate change. And this is where alternatives really come in. And this is where innovation really comes in. And we're at the point in time where EV batteries are using a lot less cobalt, nickel, lithium, all of the rare earth minerals that are necessary for EVs to operate right now. But we also had Sfolt, a company that just came out with a cobalt-free battery. This is revolutionary. And deep seabed mining companies are saying, oh, these alternatives, that none of them work, none of them can scale. But that's greenwashing. And I think our generation understands what greenwashing is. We also understand how to use technology, and we understand the information age really well. So we know greenwashing when we see it. And we know that's happening in the fossil fuel industry.
Right. And we all are aware that everybody has a narrative. There's one set of facts, and everybody has their own interpretations. And so when you're greenwashing the facts, you're just trying to deceive people into perceiving those facts as more environmentally sustainable or better for the environment than they actually are.
Right. And unfortunately, greenwashing isn't going to solve climate change, isn't going to give us the solutions we need. And what is going to solve climate change is truly sustainable solutions and innovations. And those are happening right now, despite deep seabed mining companies saying that they aren't coming or they aren't happening. They are happening. We see it with Tesla as they announced their 1,000,000-mile battery. We see it with Tesla saying that they are going to have gigafactories that recycle their batteries and reuse the rare earth minerals that they have in their lithium-ion batteries. And they're also reducing the amount of rare earth minerals already and have in their lithium-ion batteries. But we're also seeing Nissan and other car companies make that same commitment. And then we're seeing completely different innovations and alternatives. There's one company that's in stealth mode right now. They have a metal-free battery that is 2 times more efficient than anything on the market, and they're using a waste feedstock to create it.
Wow.
So those are innovations, and it's not that far off from hitting the market. So this isn't something that hasn't been tested or doesn't have patents. But for obvious reasons, they're in stealth mode with an innovation like that.
Absolutely. The idea that you're bringing up where, yes, we all want sustainable energy solutions for the future. But, deep sea mining is not the way to go about doing that. Destroying these ecosystems is not the way to go about doing that. It feels a little bit like selling your car for gas money. Like, yeah, we could have these batteries from it, but if we have destroyed the ocean's ability for the next several million years to have any sort of capacity to fix carbon and continue the basic necessities of life on Earth, it's not worth it.
Absolutely. I just want to read you guys a quote that kind of summarizes up what you just said, but in Sylvia Earle's words. So, fish, whales, clams, krill, and other ocean wildlife have an accounting base of 0 when they are alive. They are regarded as free for the taking with nothing subtracted from the ocean's balance sheet when they are captured. But there is no free lunch. All of nature and all of us pay, one way or another, for what is extracted.
And I think that's really poignant because more than any ecosystem on Earth, the ocean, it's hidden behind this veil of water. And we land-dwelling animals don't peek behind that veil often enough. And the ones that do don't always have the voice or the desire to share what they see. But if we could look down and see what was left behind of deep seabed mining operations, the devastation, the loss, if you could see that, walk past it on your way to work every day, people would be up in arms about it. But the fact that it lays hundreds or thousands of meters below the ocean surface, and no one ever visualizes it, it so greatly diminishes its importance in people's minds, because if you don't see it, it's not happening, right?
Exactly. The ocean is a global commons that is super out of sight and out of mind, but it doesn't change the fact healthy oceans are non-negotiable for our survival. And we're at the point in time where we can't keep destroying the pristine ecosystems. We can't keep annihilating biodiversity on this planet if we have any hopes of stopping climate change from becoming runaway climate change. And deep seabed mining companies can greenwash all day long, but greenwashing won't solve climate change.
Speaking of pristine environments, since that term came up, I've been trying to think of what truly pristine, untouched ecosystems I can think of on planet Earth, and I'm really struggling to come up with more than a handful.
Exactly. That's why it's the final frontier on this planet. And I just want to say one thing, that in the UN's Law of the Sea Treaty, which established the ISA, it says that the seabed is the common heritage of mankind. And it reminds me of a quote from Gloria Steinem that I love to use, because this is exactly how I felt when I first found out about deep seabed mining. That the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And when I first heard about deep seabed mining, I was pissed. And maybe the audience feels that way too. I don't know.
That's very poignant. And it's, I remember I started with sort of environmental teaching when I was really young, like 5 years old, young. And when I was up in front of people talking about it, usually to kids, I would say that these are our tomorrows. The people that are making these decisions have spent their tomorrows. And I was as upset over it as a 5-year-old can articulate. But it's very much true that the truth is uncomfortable and unpleasant in many ways. But until you know it, until it is out there, it can't spark action. Action is what solves problems, not words.
Yeah.
So speaking of taking action, why is it important that we take action now on deep seabed mining? Why is that a topic we should be worried about currently? And what can people do to take action on it?
So even though deep seabed mining seems super out of sight, out of mind, and it quite literally is, there is something called the Mining Code that is being slated to be passed through the ISA, the International Seabed Authority, this October. So this Mining Code will basically open the floodgates on allowing industrial scale mining in our deep sea. And once passed, it is going to be really hard to amend. And the draft regulations from the last ISA meeting actually had legal jargon to try and make the mining code binding, and also evading liability. So not putting deep seabed mining companies liable for any destruction that they do. The head of the ISA, Michael Lodge, his intentions are really clear, especially around putting environmental standards in the mining code. In his quote, and I'm going to read this for you guys. Once you have mining, you have monitoring. Then you can develop standards, and you can progressively tighten those standards once you have a feedback loop from monitoring your activity. So it's clear here that he's prioritizing the launch of a new global industry and is looking for ways to circumvent rather than prioritize environmental sustainability.
That's really concerning, because when it comes to creating chemicals that go out onto the U.S. market, there is now what's called the precautionary principle, which shows that you have to demonstrate that a chemical is not harmful to society and the ecosystem prior to releasing it. And that is a huge shift from how the U.S. used to regulate chemicals. And it's built around this idea that before any company can release something, they have a duty to prove that it will not harm the environment. And what you just described is a flagrant disregard of that precautionary principle, that understanding before we change anything. It's just, hey, let's go in and do all this stuff, and then we can look at what we did and say, maybe we shouldn't have done that. And that's horrifying.
Absolutely. So what's so funny, and I'm so glad you brought up the precautionary principle. This is exactly what we're pushing for. The Oxygen Project is a part of a coalition. Shout out the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition, who's been doing this good work on deep seabed mining for a long time. They've been there the whole time. It's a bunch of experts. It's a bunch of scientists that are really fighting for our future and for the deep sea. And they are pushing for a precautionary approach in the ISA. And the problem is the ISA, as I read you the head of the ISA's quote, so you kind of see the thought leadership there, but the ISA has a completely non-transparent process, and it's actually structured in a way where they have deep seabed mining companies very much influencing and working with the head of the ISA, Michael Lodge.
And that's very concerning, that lack of transparency.
And I will say, if we are going to approach the deep sea with a mining mentality, then we need to take the precautionary approach to mining.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So for our listeners, where would you recommend that they could go to learn more about deep seabed mining or to get involved with this issue? What are some resources they could visit?
I'm so glad you asked this because I've so many great resources for everyone listening to this. First, I want to say, if you are in the audience and have any reservations on what I'm saying, or if I'm biased, then I'll point you to Fauna and Flora International's report titled A Risk and Impact Assessment of Seabed Mining to Marine Ecosystems. And although that's a mouthful, it's super interesting. It has the best, most up-to-date current science on the impacts and risks that are posed by deep seabed mining. It breaks it down in a 336-page paper. But
easy reading, you know.
There is a super easy read, but there is an executive summary. So that study is super helpful. That executive summary is amazing, regardless if you have reservations or not. If you want to learn more, that's one of the best resources to look at and to really educate yourself on the science. Another thing you can do is you can go to the oxygenproject.com and you can sign up for our newsletter. I'm going to send out a newsletter soon all about deep seabed mining. And follow us on socials, specifically Instagram, because we'll be launching our campaign soon. You should also go follow the DSCC, Deep Sea Conservation Coalition. The Oxygen Project is a member of the DSCC, and so are 80 plus other organizations.
Absolutely. So if you're listening right now and you're interested in learning more, go ahead and scroll on down to the show notes. You'll see all those links right there.
Thank you so much for being on the show with us today. It was great to have you on and to meet you virtually.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conservation Connection.
If you enjoyed our podcast, go ahead and subscribe to make sure you catch every episode that we post.
We'd love to hear from you. So if you want to reach out, go to our website, lastchanceendeavors.com/contact and shoot us an email.
We love questions from our listeners, so if you heard something that you want to know more about, be sure to let us know.
If you've got a minute to spare, leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts will help other conservation-minded people find the show. We'd really appreciate it.
A big thanks to the people working to protect our planet, and a big thanks to you for listening. Don't forget to tune in next week.